Hey everybody, and welcome back. Tonight we're going to start the heel and throat from the previously fabricated two cheeks that we fabricated on the previous video here. So tonight we're going to work on the heel as well as the two required throats that we need for this project here on this two-way Y branch with the 90-degree. So entering air, 8-inch entering, and the two exiting branches there. So let's get into that next. There's my cheeks, my left and right cheek for the fitting there. Now we got to figure out our dimensions for the heel and the throat. With the throat pattern, they've got the width given as well as the 7/8 take-ups for our lock form. So that's going to determine the height of these cheeks where they've got to sit. So we got an 8-inch finalized duct with 8-inch entering openings 8x8 and leaving openings 8x8 as well. So let's get started on making the heel pattern as well as those two cheeks. We know we got to have a 7/8 mark on each side to take up for our lock former. Most lock formers will be a 1-inch. This particular part for the heel is going to have a notch in it there for this bend on that fitting, so we can give it a relief in both directions. Okay, so now let's get into it. First thing I got to do is I got to determine my width, which I've already done from the plan on the throat pattern, and know that it's going to be 8 inches plus an additional 7/8 on each side. So that's going to be cut at 9 3/4, which I've got it there, the width of a sheet, whatever it is. The next thing I want to do is I want to determine my lengths. On previous projects, if you recall, from previous videos, I've used the wire to determine the length, or I've used the formula, whatever you want to do. But on these projects here that have the bends in it, it's a little bit challenging to get the wire to work. So what I've found is if you use a 1/4-inch piece of tin, just some scrap that's laying in the bin, put a 90-degree on it, and I've already done this all. Put a 90-degree on it, set it in that center, and then work those corners out to the edges. And then with your tin snips, you can cut them off perfectly flush with the edge of the sheet. And then to do the same thing on the other side. Lay that out and cut those corners off perfectly flush with the edge of the sheet. Generally, I work it from one side to the other before it was bent there. Work it to the corner, put the bend on it where it belongs there, and then work that back around to the other side and make sure they're lined up flush. Once I've got that dimension, I can flatten it back out, and then I can take my tape measure and hook that part, and I can measure its dimension. So I'm looking at about 18 5/8 is what I previously measured for that project. But I want to keep this. I'm going to try to keep this pattern here, so when we go to roll it, I know about where the center has to be as well. So for now, I'm just going to set that aside. I know it's going to be 18 5/8 inches in length there, so I'm going to lay that out on my heel and throat part here. So let's get into that next. It says with the heel and the throat, per the plan back here, we need to have some dimension marks and some lock former marks and everything laid out. So we need to start with the 7/8 inch distance on each side for a lock former, and I'm going to do that next with this scribe here. Take the 7/8, find your dimension, and then just run that down the length of the part. We'll flip it around and we'll do it again. Okay, once that is complete, I can take my 18 5/8 dimension from here, and I can lay that out on the sheet also. So we'll measure that length. 18 5/8. And then I'll square that across so I don't lose it later on. You know, the marks can hide on the sheet metal. Okay, so that section should be my heel for the back or the top of this branch. The next thing I need to do is I've got to figure out where I've got to put my notch or my slit in there, my relief, so when I roll these things and then I got my lock form in there, I can bend each of them over oppositely and be able to put that bend on there. So then that's what I'm going to go back to this piece for, and we're going to determine the length right to the center of that edge. And then if I got a Sharpie here, sometimes it helps to put a mark right where that center is going to be on the part. Make certain I didn't move or nothing. And it appears that that's pretty decent. Right to our center. The next thing then what you can do is you can just simply fold it out, or again you can take the string and you can measure this, or the wire. That works as well. I found the tin to work pretty good. And then I'm going to line that up with the edge of my part there. And fold it flat. And then we'll transfer the center of that mark to the sheet. Now that I've got the center mark lined up there, I'll just take my square and I'll square that across to both sides. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to notch out the exposed side like we normally have been. So this will be the left hand rolled dimension, and then at our previously marked center I'm just going to notch a 3/4 chunk out of there on both sides. Like that. And then I'm going to do my take up. I'm going to take out the where they're connected, like on every other project. I'm just going to line them up and take out that gable roof or that barn roof. Mark them, but that'll have to be done with the tin snips. I'll do that on both top and bottom. Alright, so let's take our tin snips and we'll get that cut out of there. And then we'll do the same on this other side. We'll knock these two corners off here. And then at this point right now, I've got my heel completed for as far as fabrication goes. Now I'm ready to run it through the lock form machine for this section. But I'm going to wait just a second because I'm going to run it all at once. I'm going to run the heel and my two inside throats. So this time with my inside throats, I'm just going to use the wire to measure them for you. So taking my wire, well, you can pull that around just like any other project. Again, you can do this with the piece of tin too, and that would work just fine. So start right on the foot there. Should land right at 7 1/4, and it does. Alright, the next thing I want to check is the other side. Make certain they're equal. And this one should also be identical to that 7 1/4, because we scribed those radiuses at the exact same time, and that's also going to work out 7 1/4. So we need 2 of them at that length of 7 1/4. So from this point on, the last of my heel, I'm going to measure an additional 7 1/4 inches, or you can start from the other end if you want and have the drop in the center. It's your choice. But being as I've got this cut out already, I might as well just go from here. We'll measure that 7 1/4 inches. And again, square that across for that inner throat. And we need one more identical to that, tacked right onto the end. 7 1/4. So I've got about 3 inches of waste on my sheet that I've got to cut off after a while. You can cut it off now if you prefer, or you can just take those snippets out of there, the reliefs, or rather our notches out of there, however you prefer. Generally, I will go over and cut it off and then just finish notching it out, but being as I've got to do one of these anyway, we'll probably just cut it out here while I'm marking them. So again, getting them lined up where they need to be. Do that on both sides. Might even be quicker if I still go over and cut it off. And we'll do the same on the other side. Okay, so back to my tin snips. Take that little gable roof out of there. So let's flip that back around again. So what we've got here is on the left chunk here, we've got our heel. We're going to have a rolled edge. We're going to have a bend in a 90, and then we're going to have a rolled edge. This will be one section. And then we're going to have our throat, our A throat, as well as our B throat on both sides of the piece, and then we've got this drop. So let's go ahead and run it through the lock former, or cut it first, whatever, and yeah, I'll probably cut this off, and then we'll run the rest of this through the lock former, and then we'll slit the two throat sections from the heel. So let's do that now. So let's go ahead and cut our length, this scrap out of here, and then we'll finish slitting these through after a little bit. So get that lined up in there. And there's my 3 inches of drop. Now I'm ready to run it through the lock former. So keeping everything tight up against the fence there. This part's kind of important because we've got a bigger section. If you prefer, you can slit through between the two and have this as a section. This is long enough, and this is a long enough section as well. So again, that one ran through pretty smoothly, but if you have any sort of wiggle in it, you can mess up the whole piece. So it might be a good idea to slit through and slice and make it two parts out of it. Okay, back over here at the shear then, we're going to now separate the heel from the two throats. Okay, so slit in there, it's all lined up. And now we got our throats and our heel separated from one another in that scenario. If, like I was saying before, if you wanted to run this through the lock former as two separate pieces, or if you had two shorter pieces of scrap, that would be perfectly okay. Just we got to make sure we're greater than that 8 inches so it doesn't get jammed up inside the machine there. So the last thing for us to do is to separate the two throats from one another. So let's set the heel aside and we'll complete that next. Alright, with our throats and our heel ready to go, now we're ready to roll them and finish up with the fabrication. Okay, so back here at the work table then, what we've got is we've got our cheeks laid out in front of us. We've got the two sections that we just cut off for the throats, which we've got to roll yet, and we've got this heel fabricated section, which is ready to be rolled. But before we roll it, we have to put this 90-degree bend like we were measuring previously on this mark here. That's right at about a 90 degree, so we can roll that. Otherwise it'd be very difficult to put that 90 on if you rolled it first. So we got to set that in the brake over there, put the 90 degree on it, and then roll it. But before I do that, I'm going to get my spacers put in there, and we'll bend everything all at once because the spacers will be hard to put in after the fact too. Okay, now with the spacers in there, we can use these gauge points here and put that 90-degree bend on it. So let's do that next. Make certain here that you bend the 90 to the proper angle, as in don't have the sheet flipped over with the lines up. This time because the 90 has to match the outside contour properly. So we're going to slip that in there, find our center points, get it tightened up, and put our bend on it. And pull that to about a 90 degree. At this point in time, we got something that looks like this here. Now we got to finish putting the rolls on each side of that. As well, while we're doing those rolls, we'll work on the throats rolls. So let me find some spacers for them, and we'll be ready to go. Let's finish putting these last two spacers in here, and then we will commence to putting the rolls on these throats and the heels to match the contour of everything that we need. Okay, so we're getting ready to put the rolls on this. This section is going to be connected right into the center of this unit here. So what we got to do is we got to have the rolls match the curvature of each half. So we're going to start with it in there just like that, somewhat loose here, and see what we got to do for our tension. And it appears that we need quite a bit on that that setup there for tension. So we're going to tighten them up evenly, a couple turns, and we'll run it again. And that's looking pretty close for that side, so let's spin it around and we'll do the same to the other half. Two fairly similar looking contours there. And it looks like I've overbent it just ever so slightly, so we'll straighten them up just a little bit, but I think that's okay. Then we're going to roll the two throats. Again, taking into account which direction that they have to be rolled. This would be wrong, so it's got to be this side to the top to make that curvature. So before I do this, I'm going to loosen them up slightly. Make certain we don't overbend it. And if you like, you can do both of these at the same time. So you only got to reset it once. That looks like we're getting awfully close on that one. Check the other one. I think maybe that's really close too. I think we'll stop there. Okay, so there we have it. We've got the heel bent and fabricated and rolled and everything, as well as the two throats, the left and the right hand throat there, ready for the assembly. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, part 2 of the 3-part series on this 90-degree Y branch connection. So thank you for joining me. I hope this helps, and we'll catch you on the next one.